Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Just wanted to ask you a couple quick questions about some of the policy issues that were pushed for us. Let me tell you, it's very refreshing to be talking this year about funding various things instead of about policy issues, which dominated a lot of the conversation last year. But I am curious with the governor putting forth his proposal. He seemed to really put the onus completely on the state education department to enact those recommendations from the Common Core Task Force. I was just wondering what your thoughts are in terms of whether you think there is anything we need to do legislatively to empower the department to enact some of those recommendations.
Well, so if we walk through the recommendations, and there's probably, I would say, you can distill it down to 3 or 4 key areas. First of all, we have done the initial work on determining where we need to go with standards, and that is, we know that in a survey that was done by the State Ed Department, where we collected over 250,000 pieces of data and opinions related to all of the standards, we know that for the most part, 71% of the people that responded to that survey believe in higher standards. But they also gave us information that we need to review because they suggested moving standards, changing the difficulty in specific grade levels, for instance, early grades being more difficult than perhaps is appropriate for that age and grade level. So we have much work to do to review the standards for New York State. It needs to be an open and transparent process. It needs to have practitioners, that is teachers and administrators from across the state involved in committees. And it needs to be done in a way that we can get input from the public in multiple ways and use that input to make recommendations back to the regions for what the standards for New York State students should be. We agree they need to be high standards. It is a normal thing to review standards every few years. You have put in legislation that they'll be reviewed after every 5 years. I think that's appropriate. And it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes people to work to make sure that a process like that can be done appropriately. There is no funding in here for any of that. So that's one area that I think that needs to be addressed. Secondly, I would suggest to you, and it was brought up a number of times in the testimony that we heard from across the state, from parents and stakeholders, and Senator Marcelino and Assemblywoman Nolan, as chairs of their committee, were part of our group. And as we talked about it, it was clear we have to support our teachers. In fact, on one of the slides in your deck, we point out that one of the specific examples of work to be done is helping teachers and giving them staff development, helping them understand the standards, how to teach the standards, and then supporting them in developing lesson plans that are related to the delivery of those standards. We have a resource that's been used in New York over the last several years called Engage New York. It's an online opportunity for teachers to get information. It needs to be worked on, but key to this is the staff development piece that was suggested as one of the key recommendations from the Governor's Task Force. It was recommendation number 9 and specifically speaks to across the board. It can't be a program where a district that has a great grant writer can get, because the districts that don't have the great grant writers have teachers and kids that need to have the support. So we need to have funding for staff development that is consistent for every teacher across the state, and we need to develop a career ladder so that every school has a master teacher that can support and help continuous ongoing improvement in our schools. We had a model that was used that previously had been funded through our Race to the Top grant. That funding is gone, but it was consistently, and all the people that I've talked to have indicated that The STLE, the Strengthening Teacher Leader Effectiveness model, was very effective, but everybody didn't get it. And so you have pockets in some of the most needy school districts and urban districts where we didn't have that support for teachers. And that will make a huge change when we see things changing every day in every classroom across the state. So there are other things that were also brought up. The issue of the testing. We need to think of different ways to test our children. We need to put in project-based assessments. Project-based assessments cost money. You have to develop them with the teachers of New York. You have to then put the teachers in place so that they can be supportive of the students who opt to do a project-based assessment. And then after you've done that, you have to have trained reviewers who will look at each of those with the appropriate rubric and consistently assess them across the state. So all of that is taking resources, and that was called for in the report, and it was not funded. So I think it's important for us to understand we all want what's right for our kids. We all want a state that can be proud of what they do for their children, but also can be a strong state in terms of developing its workforce and all of the things that are necessary for success. And if you follow, and I was so pleased to be part of a very productive workforce group that put together these recommendations, if you follow the recommendations and support us to make these things happen, we will do them.
Okay. Just getting slightly more specific, so teacher evaluations. We know,
Right.
the action was taken to delay the use of the scores and the evaluations, but at least in my view, as that provision in statute currently stands, I find it very limiting, and I'm hearing from some of my superintendents, concerns on. I think that was the major piece in terms of general public concern on the testing side, but then it kind of, I think, leaves the rest of it for the districts to work through and figure out how the assessment piece is going to work on top of, things like the outside evaluators and things of that nature. So do you view from the department that the legislature needs to make any further changes to the teacher evaluation as in current statute?
So there's no question that we have to look at what the evaluation process is, and then how it's constructed and how it's connected to performance of students and how we do that. There's no question that has to occur. Right now what we've done is we have stepped back, and by putting in place this transition period until 2019-2020 school year, we have much to do. We have work to do on the standards. We have work to do on staff development and curriculum. All of those things were part of the commission. We have work to do relative to the assessments. And again, teachers need to be very involved in that. And we need, as we're moving forward, we need to put together a team of people from all of our practitioner groups and our parent groups to talk about what is an appropriate way to have an accountability system in the state of New York. So in New York, we invest over $60 billion a year in education. You support that. If you want to have a great system and you want to get better and you want to provide what students need, we need to figure out a way that we can all know that we are accountable for that investment and that we're doing what needs to be done for all kids across the state. So we need to do an evaluation system, not just for teachers, for principals, and across the state for our districts. But it doesn't happen overnight, and it does require input, and it needs to look at how we're progressing in those areas that are related to it, like the standards development, like the assessments, like the work with teachers, so that when we have that evaluation in place, it is fair and appropriate, and it talks about the importance of helping teachers get better with continuous improvement every day. No evaluation should be trying to skewer people. It shouldn't be, and unfortunately, I think the rhetoric has gone that direction, and I think we have to shift that immediately.
Thank you, Commissioner.